It's all yours, Dwayne. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I'm very proud, very glad to be here, very proud to be here as well. So I thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. Quick update. I actually updated my title since I gave you that bio. I'm actually a developer advocate. Same job. I help people figure things out here at Pantheon. Um, you can always reach me out in the world at MC Dwayne on Twitter. That's my preferred way to contact and talk to people. The slides for this and any other talk I give are over at my website, mcdwayne.com. And if you want to ever reach out to me directly, there's my email address right there on the screen. So I give a lot of talks. This is just from this year, my inception photo of me giving talks. This is the last one at Stanford. Last year, I gave somewhere around 27 talks at various events throughout the world. And I've learned a lot doing so. And I tried to package up what I've learned and things I wished people have told me when I first started out to get me over that initial fear and that initial hump. And that's what this talk is really all about, is how to go forth and make a talk up and deliver it out to a crowd. So very quick plug for Pantheon here. We are a web hosting management platform, definitely more than hosting. So if you're looking for your next project and want to give a get off to a running start very quickly, no matter how big your team is, try Pantheon. We will make your life easier using Drupal and WordPress. All right. Normally, I'm giving this talk in front of a crowd, but I guess I can't ask interactively right now. But if you want to use the chat functionality, if you're on this webinar, and let us know, where you're from and why this talk. I would always love to hear why this talk and what drew you in to coming to see this one. Very much appreciate that. But since I can't get your live feedback in real time here, we'll just move on since this is a webinar. So in all of my talks and every talk I go to, I really think it's important to understand the why. If we don't understand the why, the what is never really important. We'll never really care about it. So the main reasons I think that we should go out and speak at camps and conferences is, well, we're repaying the favor. Someone taught you something once. No matter who you are, you've learned something because someone else said it out loud. I've been very fortunate to go to a lot of conferences and get taught a great number of things by a great number of people. And it's my way of paying back the community, of sharing my knowledge and sharing things that I think are important out there with the world. And you probably understand something that other people don't understand in the same way. I'm very, very happy to hear that the next talk that is coming up in the series is about Git, one of my favorite subjects in the entire world. And I've been told I have a very different perspective on it than some people. And that's why I like sharing that, my perspective, because it helps other people get to a place of understanding. But it's true, no matter, even if you've just installed Drupal for the first time and only once, you know more about it than a great number of people in the world. And you understand it in a way that a novice understands it, that the person who's been using Drupal since Drupal 4 simply doesn't. And you understand concepts that a lot of people maybe think is assumed. So never think that, hey, I don't know enough about this subject to present on it. If you know something about it, then you know enough to actually go out there and present what you know. I really like this quote from Daniel Quinn here. There's no hidden knowledge in what we do. Everything is open source. Everything is in the docs. And yes, we could go read the docs and get it ourselves and read composer concepts and other blog articles and piece together our own learnings as individuals. But once we have done that, going out and sharing that is going to help everyone else in the whole world and expand that body of knowledge. And I've said it already, but this is a great way to give back to the community and keep the community growing. Without enough sessions being submitted to camps, well, there's not enough content at camps. And if we're only talking about one specific thing at a camp, then, well, only people that are interested in only that specific topic are going to show up to the camp. So it's important to keep feeding the community new ideas. And this is a very good way to do that, we can simply share these ideas and the community will keep growing from there. But really, more than anything else, personally, from a pure selfish standpoint, there's no other feeling quite like this than being able to present to others and share your knowledge. And it's just a wonderful feeling. So for no other reason, if you don't care about sharing knowledge and other people learning, doing it for yourself is not a bad motivator. I tell you what, there's not a lot of experiences I've had than walking off stage and having someone come up to me and saying, wow, thank you very much. I understand this idea better now and haven't really thought about it in those ways before. That's one of the greatest thrills I've ever had in my whole life. So that's why I do these things. So let's talk about where. If we understand, well, yeah, that sounds great and all, but where are we talking about? Well, there's the big shows. In our industry, we have the wonderfulness of DrupalCon. You missed the deadline and the event this year. Already put it on your calendar for next year and look forward to coming to Seattle and being part of DrupalCon in 2019. They've already announced the dates for 2019 and for 2020, but you can get your talks ready and submitted. Submissions have not opened yet. It's very early, so you have plenty of time to prepare if you want to talk at the big show in front of a lot of people. But more accessible are the camps, and DrupalGovCon is one of those such camps. It's not the big DrupalCon, but it is also its own con. It is also a very large event. There are other Drupal camps as well. There are camps all over the place. DrupalCal is the website. You can find all of the various camps going on around the world. Bad Camp is coming up later this year. Submissions are open for that one. And there are other camps outside of the bubble of Drupal. It's wonderful to be around in our community and share these ideas. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of people using PHP out there. There are a lot of people trying to solve the same fundamental use cases. And having a spillover of knowledge is a good thing in sharing those ideas, so we're not just isolated in our bubble. I can point to a couple examples here recently. Mauricio from Nicaragua, wonderful presenter and wonderful human being. He went to WordCamp, his first WordCamp ever, and spoke at it this year and represented Drupal exceptionally well. On the other side of that, at DrupalCon, the head of the community and the head of the community team and the head of the security team both came and gave talks. And what a wonderful opportunity to share knowledge, to get in the same room in this fellowship of PHP, talking to each other. Not just WordPress and Drupal, but across the board. There's a lot of different opportunities out there. So if you haven't looked outside of the government space or outside of the Drupal space, I highly encourage you to go look at what events are happening around you in your community. Then a lot of the times these are coming to you. And where everyone really starts giving talks, I think, from my experience and from talking to a lot of people, is meetups. I know the very first time I addressed a crowd about anything technical was, in fact, at a meetup. I helped co-present something long before I got up and gave an independent talk here at a particular Drupal camp. MidCamp was the first place I ever gave a talk on my own, but the first time I spoke was at a meetup. Meetups are generally much smaller, much lower pressure. If you are not involved in your meetup actively, go. I highly encourage you to find one and go. Everyone's very welcoming. It's, again, very low pressure situation, but go meet that community, and they always need speakers. Every meetup I've ever attended is always looking for new content and new ideas. And again, you understand something that they might not, go talk to them and see if they will let you speak. Chances are they will. But if that seems like a lot of pressure, that I have to go join this organization and climb this ladder of they trust me enough to get up there and speak, well, you already work with people that trust you enough to listen to you for a little bit. They're called your fellow employees. Something that we do here, not quite a lunch and learn, but it's the same idea, is we have an opportunity once a week to present something to the whole company at once on Thursday afternoons. We use that venue for a few different things, but same idea that, hey, colleagues, come listen to my idea and give me feedback on it. Lunch and learns are a great example where if you don't eat lunch together, well, collaboratively eat lunch, meet as people, and then say, hey, give me 15 minutes to get this idea out the door and present to you. Or I work with a distributed team, being able to say, hey, let's get on the same Zoom call at the same time. Let's eat our lunch together. It's a rare event that we ever do because we're so distributed across the world. But let's get together in the same place, and I'll talk through these ideas, and you give me feedback on them. And ultimately, if that sounds intimidating, that I don't want to put myself out there in front of my peers, and you want to get started giving talks, get a group of your friends together. I'm not even joking. I have run so many ideas across groups of my friends, across various passions of mine in my life. that it really helped me when I started the formal path of going to meetups and trying to talk at conferences. That confidence that I had talked to these people that I know trusted, there was no pressure, they were going to love me no matter what. They gave me that real tactile, immediate feedback that I would talk to them 2 or 3 people at a time, and wow, I can do this. Like my ideas they're not throwing chairs at me or throwing drinks in my face and saying you're a terrible person, because no one's going to do that. Don't get that idea in your head. But your friends are there to support you. But you can climb that ladder back up the other way and see a progression where eventually you end up talking at the big conferences. Maybe not just DrupalCon, maybe the larger PHP conferences and other government conferences in the world. All right. So we talked about where and we talked about why. What are we going to talk about? This is the stumper for a lot of people. I know this was for me when I first started. My background is in sales and marketing, and going to a tech conference, a Drupal conference or a WordCamp, and thinking, well, I need to talk about something deeply technical. Well, that might be true, but for me, it wasn't. Turns out the thing that I ended up talking about in the very first place was sales process. And as long as it makes you excited, as long as you're actually passionate about it, that overrides pretty much the other criteria. If you have a strong opinion on it and think this is something other people need to also get excited about, that will spread like wildfire. In fact, even this talk itself, I love giving talks so much that I wrote a talk about giving talks, and it got accepted, and here I am in front of you today. If it makes you excited, it will probably make someone else excited. So capture that passion and try to formalize that up into a talk. We'll talk about how to actually formalize it into a talk in the next section. But if you have things that, hey, I've been telling everybody about this, it's probably time to tell people about that in a more formal way. A big one that actually surprised me when I first heard about this idea and then actually tried it, but it turned out to be one of the more successful things I've ever done, is I wanted to learn something deeply. Now, I'm not saying sign up for doing a talk on something you have no concept about and you want to explore the world of quantum physics. Maybe do your homework there first. But for me, the example is Git. I knew Git. I knew how to git pull, git push. I knew the basics. But then I signed up to give a class on it, give a session on it. And I tell you what, nothing puts you on a track of learning it deeply like having to explain something. So once I figured out these concepts and explained them enough to explain them to other people, I learned them so deeply. So if there's a topic that you really think, I want to learn that more deeply, sign up to give a talk on it. And nothing will set your hair on fire quite like having to go teach it to someone else. Is there just something you wish people knew about? Git, again, is one of those things for me where I just wish more people knew Git. More people know Git, the better I think humanity gets. So something you just wish someone could walk away knowing, well, this one new fact or this one new perspective. If you're excited about it, that's even more powerful, but something that is going to help humanity overall. Turns out you can talk about things you've already talked about. You don't have to come up with completely unique standalone concepts for these talks. If there's something that has popped up in your blog, if you're not blogging, I highly, highly encourage everyone to blog out there. There's a few great platforms for that I can name, including one that starts with a big D. But go out and express yourself in the world, and you'll find that there's themes that come up again. For me, Git was one of them, among the other topics that I talk about there in the world. But you already have this treasure trove of formulating your thoughts that you into consumable form. That if you've written it down and you thought through it well enough to write it down, you can probably present that. So going back through your old writings and finding, well, I talked about this several times, maybe I should give a formal talk on that. It's probably a good idea, especially if it's something, again, you are very passionate about and wish more people knew. If you don't keep a blog, no big deal, because all your emails. If I was live with you in the room right now, and I'm going to ask everyone to do it anyway, raise your hand if you've ever written the same email more than 3 times. I'm guessing most people raise their hand because it's always the case. That's just human nature. We eventually become the tribal knowledge holder for some bit of information that people constantly come to us for. And I say tribal, it could just be within your group of your clients, group of your peers, but there's something that people come to you consistently to find out. What a great topic for you to be the subject matter expert in. within that group, and then to share that knowledge with the whole world. So go back through, look for keywords. If you can do a text dump and then grep through and find out your keywords, that's even better way to do it. But do some text analytics. But I guarantee you've already written stuff down that you could turn into a talk very, very easily. And don't be scared of, hey, I saw someone else do this talk. I can't do that talk now. One of my more popular talks that I give is on the WordPress command line interface, WP CLI. And the very first time I gave that talk, I literally borrowed verbatim someone else's talk and gave it to a small meetup. And then I set it off and found my own voice on that. But if it's an idea that you say, I wish more people knew about this, I saw this great talk about it once, ooh, maybe I could give that same talk. The answer is yes. In fact, if you go back to the person who gave that talk, I can't imagine a scenario where this wouldn't be true, but it's always been true in my case that they're very receptive. They're very open and applauding the idea like, oh my goodness, yes. So the person who I borrowed the WP CLI talk from, a person of McKinney named Sean Hooper, he was ecstatic. He was more than happy to give me every note he had ever taken, point me in the direction of every blog he had ever read, and was very congratulatory that someone else was talking about this subject out in the world. If you're passionate about it and you think other people should know it, having someone else also talk about it is a good thing. This isn't an industry where I have this, the trade secret. I'm not going to tell anyone. It's behind a paywall. That's not how open source works. In general, we are all borrowing from each other. We're all standing on the shoulders of giants. None of my ideas are completely original because they're derived from all of these wonderful writings and Martin Fowler and the other great thinkers of the world for what we do. So if you see a talk you really like, ask, and they'll probably let you do a version of that. All right. So we know now what we're going to generally talk about. We know where we're going to talk. We know why we're going to do it. So how do we get on this thing? How do we actually make this darn session happen? Well, for me, there's multiple approaches to this. So I don't want you to think this is the be-all, end-all way to do this. This is what I learned giving approximately about 40 talks in my life. That when you sit down to think about your talk, you need an outline. Outlines don't have to be super detailed. Outlines just need to have a major point you're trying to get across, some subpoints that you think are important to demonstrate that central point, and then a conclusion that brings us back to that original point. Not saying every talk has to be structured this way, but it is an age-old, time-tested tradition, or methodology, I should say, not tradition, but methodology of tell someone what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. My dad was a preacher, and that's every sermon he ever gave was structured exactly that way. And it works. No reason to reinvent the wheel on this one. So sit down, think, here's what the main thing I want them to walk away. I want them to walk away with understanding at least the basics of forward and backwards and Git. Great. Now, how do we do that? There's the major points of that along the path. And at the end, we conclude it with telling them that's what they learned and how to go get more details about that. You're going to need some slides. I like Google Slides personally because it's hyper transportable. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But you need something to present. What's on the slides, we'll talk about in a bit, but the technology itself is kind of trivial. It doesn't matter. I put 4 examples up because these are the first 4 that came to mind. If you have a better approach, use that. But just know that you are going to need to share those slides at some point. Presentations are great, but sharing that presentation out is super important. All of my slides end up living, or at least the links to where they live are overall consolidated on my website. Highly suggest doing that, giving yourself a little bit of SEO mojo there by putting things in a place where people go through your intellectual property to get to them, but make it in a very consumable form. I like PDFs because they're, very, very, very transportable. SlideShare has kind of gone the way of the dodo, I think, in certain regards. It's still there, still functioning, but Google Drive, other methodologies are also great ways to go. Google Drive works very well with presentations or Google presentations, so I don't have to do any extra work. It's just shareable. On the actual slides, you want them to be very readable. I bet at least one person out there watching this live leaned into their monitor just now to try to read what's on this slide. You don't want your audience doing that. You don't want an audience having to strain their eyes to see what's on here. This is actually taken from one of my other talks, and the whole point of the slide is don't overwhelm people with information. You don't need to know all of this at once. It's too crowded. There's too much stuff going on. 3 points maximum per slide. A lot of people, like myself, think that 1 point a slide is good enough. I would rather have a 40 to 50 slide deck than have 4 slides with the same information on it. It's just going to be way more consumable. More slides is better, in my opinion. And ultimately, clean designs work a lot better. The picture on the right, that is how branching and merging works in one simple, easy to consume thing with Git. That is one picture that explains Git magically. The one on the left, I'm still not 100% sure what this picture says and what all it's trying to tell me. There's a lot of information there, and it's a very complex subject. I agree. But clean designs simply work better. If you can reduce it to stick figures, reduce it to stick figures. If you can reduce it to a simple whiteboard drawing, that's even better. The more complex, the harder it is. I actually suffer from this quite a bit. In some of my talks, I make animated GIFs for a lot of command line things, and it's very distracting. So I'm learning even myself to improve to separate those things out. So the animated GIF is a secondary feature. All right. Submitting your talks. We made our slides. We made our outline. We practiced this thing. How do we go about submitting our talks? Well, very first thing you're going to need to submit this talk is an abstract. Every single talk you'll ever submit is going to have a title and then some major bullet points why people should walk into that room. I've distilled it down to this. Something catching and to the point. Descriptive is better than clever. Can't stress that enough. My favorite example of me learning that the hard way was my WP-CLI talk. I structured the title of the talk at one point to be WP-CLI yes you -- can, which is the command structure. And I thought it was clever, and people that understood WP-CLI thought it was clever. But the time I gave it under that title, I only had a handful of people in the room. And every other time I'd given it, I had many more people come in the room. The title threw everyone off. It was something clever, but it wasn't straightforward. Now it's called WP-CLI Don't Fear the Command Line. And everyone knows, oh, it's command line, and I'm afraid of the command line. Maybe I should go in there. Then they'll go on and read the rest of the description. Without a title that's clear, they're never going to read the description of the talk. Then in the body, the description of your talk, it should, again, stress why this should matter to someone and why you think it matters. If you're very passionate about it, that should spell out there. You don't need to give the whole talk in your description. 3 or 4 sentences is good enough. And I think it's very important to say what they'll walk away with. In fact, some camps and some organizations will specifically ask for a section that lists bullet points to say, what will they walk out of the room knowing? A very effective, clean way, bullet points to show people, hey, if you come in and learn this, then, well, this is the right talk for you. Or want to learn this, then this is the right talk for you. Most camps will actually tell you specifically what they're looking for. So if you've written a talk on, let's say SEO, just to not pick on SEO, but you've written a talk on SEO, and you go to the camp screen and the session submission screen and list, hey, we're looking for all of these topics. You can still submit it. There's nothing wrong with submitting that. But it should fit in with the things that they're looking for. The things they're looking for are the first things they'll take. So if you have another talk idea that more matches, say in this talk, this particular here, this year's focus is going to be on multilingual development. If you have any thoughts on multilingual development, well, that would be the first thing you should submit because that's the one they're actually looking for. Not every thing you submit to will have something this clear and say this is the focus. Some will have bullet points and say here's talk suggestion ideas and even some title suggestions for you. This is specifically what we're trying to accomplish with this camp. It varies wildly, but make sure you're reading the session submission screen thoroughly before you actually submit anything. Nothing wrong with submitting your own ideas. That can be anything, as it says here. Talk to me on any other topic, but know that that's the first thing they're looking for. In this case, was the multilingual development. You don't have to submit just one talk. When I first started talking, I thought I was limited to one talk. And then it dawned on me, no, I can submit all of my talks. And then one of my mentors, the person who actually had the role of development developer advocate here long before I did, a guy named Cal Evans. I've linked to his blog here. He wrote this wonderful blog article that said, no, you got a maximum of 4. After that, it's annoying. I've been told by certain camp organizers that 4 is a lot, but it's not offensively a lot. Always submit your best first, always. And if you think that's the only thing I want to talk about, that's fine. No pressure to do more. But if I really, really want to go to this talk, I really want to go to this camp, I really want to go give this, spread this message and be there, and I want to talk at all, yeah, submit multiple ones. Nothing wrong with that, but limit it up to 4 talks. Don't go crazy. Cal gives an example in there. We used to give up to 10, and that made some people mad. More important than anything else I have said here today, I've kind of tricked you into coming to this section if you're still with me. Just believe in yourself. And I know that's a really, really easy thing to say, and we all have self-doubts. I have imposter syndrome like nobody's business. But here's the reality of imposter syndrome. In one picture, I love this slide that I borrowed from someone's presentation at WP Campus last year. This is the reality. Like, we aren't in this little tiny bubble and everyone else knows so much more than we do. I personally feel like that a lot, especially dealing with some of the smartest developers in the world working with Drupal and WordPress here. But the truth is, I know things that overlap other things they know, and they know things that overlap things other people know. And all in all, together, we all know an awful lot, and we should be able to share freely that knowledge. And that fear of, I'm going to put myself out there and everyone's going to know I'm a fraud, that is not isolated to you. If you've ever felt like that, Einstein felt that. In fact, if you go review his memoirs his personal writings, toward the end, he calls himself a fraud, that he will be remembered as one of history's greatest monsters for misunderstanding math, which is hilarious in retrospect. But every great person goes through that. Every single human being, I feel, has some form of imposter syndrome. Get over it. Just go forward and do. Know that the community is there and we're going to support you. If you feel you need to be ready enough, you're never going to go. In fact, I would argue what I've said today, write the abstract first, submit it, and once it's accepted, then you can write the outline. Then you can make the slides. Something to push you over that edge. Something to make you say, all right, I have a deadline. I'm going to do this. If you want to get it pitch perfect, you are never going to give a talk. As you can probably tell from my slides, that's nothing I've ever worried about. My slides are good enough, not ready enough. They'll never be ready enough. If I gave this to a designer, I think they would have a heart attack first and then tell me everything I did wrong, and then we'd fix it and be months of back and forth, and then I'd have a perfect slide deck. But I wouldn't have presented this the way it is, and I wouldn't have encouraged as many people as I have in the world, because I would have gone through a process and tried to make it perfect instead of just getting out there and talking to the world. I said it earlier, but I'll stress it. We are in one of the greatest industries in the world. The web industry in general is amazing. And the fact that we're working in the open source world, even on top of that, there's never been something like this. Realize we're only in the 20th year of open source. The Open Source Initiative, this is their 20th year in business, and they're celebrating big this year. If you're not familiar with them, go look up the Open Source Initiative. 20 years of open source, where we can say clearly this is how the GPL and everything has influenced the world. We're in a new era, and that idea of sharing with each other, being part of this one community where we're all trying to get better together, I can safely say is amazing. No matter what you say, even you get up and you say things that are just factually wrong, the community will still support you. They might try to correct you, and you'll get an interesting Q&A in that session, but they will be there to support you. No one's going to run you out on your ear for saying things that are you're very passionate about, that you think are pushing the community forward. Now, I'm not saying you should get up and say hateful things or bad things. I even left that out of this talk entirely because it's common sense. Let's stay within the community standards, of course, But as long as we're in the code of conduct, as long as we're saying things that we think are good, the community will be there for you, celebrating your success. Again, no other feeling quite like having the community after a talk give you feedback and say, wow, thank you so much for participating. And on that subject, be humble with this. People are giving their time and attention. They're paying to come to a conference, and they chose to, out of all the competing efforts, even your lives today watching this webinar, thank you so much. Accept the feedback. If you want to leave feedback on this talk, please feel free to leave a comment over on my blog, or email me directly, or tweet it. Any way you want to get it to me, that's great, but I love feedback. We can't get better without feedback. If we stay in the bubble of ourselves, we will never improve. So accept that feedback graciously. In fact, there's feedback I got from giving talks at Stanford just recently that I'm fine-tuning a couple of my talks right now. They're open in other windows that need to have actions taken on that feedback I've gotten. Be gracious for it. Be humble with it. Again, community's awesome. No one's going to say your talk was terrible and you should never give it again. Never heard of that happening. They might say, have some constructive feedback for you. They might not phrase it perfectly in the way you would have, but they're just trying to make the world better. And just know that. But have fun with this stuff. If it is a challenge, that's good. If it is something that is paralyzing you with fear and something that sounds like a terrible burden to do, well, nobody's holding a gun to your head and saying you have to give a talk. I hope that's not happening anyway. This should be a delightful experience. It is stressful. There is a lot of worry and concern you will have through the process, but overall, this is actually one really fun thing to do. Engaging with the community and having conversation is, at least for me, one of the best things in the whole universe. So having a more structured way to have those conversations is even more fun. And last, I almost put this up in the other section about making slides, is don't go crazy with animated GIFs. People love animated GIFs, but people also love staring at animated GIFs. And if I left this on the screen the whole time I was talking today, I guarantee you everyone would tune out at some point and just follow one of the blue balls. Love this GIF, found it at random when I was looking up busy animated GIFs. Animated GIFs are great, but in moderation. So just don't go crazy with them. And if you're going to put them up, don't leave them up for too long. And now's the time everyone claps. I end up all my slides with this way. A lot of resources out there for you. Again, you can get these slides over at mcdwayne.com and find some of these articles out there. Again, most of this is about imposter syndrome, because once you get over the fact that you don't think you're good enough, it really frees you up to go present things. And with that, I'm going to open this up for Q&A. Thanks. Oh, I guess on the Q&A, I need to go over and look at our chat. And it doesn't look like I have any questions just yet. So feel free to use that chat functionality or unmute yourself if that's possible. I don't know if that's possible in the way this Zoom is set up.
Well, Dwayne, this is Jessica, one of the hosts. I will go ahead. I'll throw in a question there. How do you, or I should say, when an event offers the opportunity for you to view existing proposed sessions, right? And you see ones that are maybe similar to what you want to talk about. Do you decide not to put yours in, or do you find that being competitive in that way, and you just try to make sure that you identify what's different about your talk than maybe what's presented?
Mm-hmm. It depends on the situation. I will always submit something. I'll put it that way. I'm not shy about doing that. I will submit things that more align with it. I am fortunate to have a backlog of talks, and I'm always working on new talks. And sometimes my new talk ideas are driven directly from things I read on the submission sites. In fact, a new talk I'm working on now is a content deployment pipeline using build tools. and command line interface. That's specifically for the WordPress world, but that idea came to me from ideas they were looking for a particular camp coming up in the future of both. They're looking for content deployment strategy and command line tool talks. So why don't I marry those two ideas, and then we'll get best of both worlds, and it'll show up higher on the ranking. And it turns out the more I dig into the subject, the more fascinated it becomes, and the more passionate I become about it. So I've gone that route. I've also not submitted talks that I thought, I love this talk and I really want to give this talk, but that doesn't match anything they're looking for. And I'm just not going to submit it now because I don't want to get shot down on it. But I have these other talks that more or less fit. And there's times in the middle where I will argue that this talk that on the surface doesn't sound like it's what you're looking for is what you're looking for. Some camps limit you to only submit just a title and body field for the talk itself. Some will give you an additional field to fill in for why you think this talk is important. And that's the field that the evaluators will read before they read, or as they're reading the session submission itself. So if you can make a compelling argument why this talk about sales process is good for a product management talk or a project management talk, which is what's happened to me in the past, then yeah, go for it.
I'll go ahead and jump in with one more.
Sure.
So as an organizer of events, especially with something like GovCon, every year we take a look at our tracks, and it doesn't matter. It seems no matter how we end up doing them, whether we end up having a lot or a little, there's always some level of confusion from some users about which track their session really kind of falls into. Do you have any advice, both for organizers as well as submitters, as making sure that you're submitting your sessions within the right tracks? And for those of us that come up with the tracks, how we can be better about making it clear what goes where?
Yeah, there's a couple different things in there. The first is fitting into existing tracks as a submitter. This is something I've struggled with at various camps. Some camps make it crystal clear. If I'm giving a CLI talk, and then there's a tooling track, it definitely goes in there. But Git is actually one that always confuses me, because Git is for knowledge workers, and everyone's a knowledge worker, so that really goes design and back-end development and front-end development and content and everywhere else. So where do I put it? I'll talk about Git. If you reach out to the teams, I find more often than not, they're very happy to help you figure it out. In fact, where was that? I think it was DrupalCon. One of the submission options was, I'm not sure where this talk goes. And you could have them specifically help you figure out which one it goes to. On the other side, as a camp organizer, I was an organizer of mid-camp this year, and this actually came up. This is a hard challenge. Especially in a world where the front end and the back end are getting more separate, but at the same time, the tool chain is very, feels like it's very much collapsing. So if I'm a front end designer, do I care about SaaS? Yes. Am I back end designer, do I care about SaaS? Yes. So where does the SaaS talk sit? Well, I guess it depends on what area we're talking about. So it becomes that challenge of putting these buckets. So giving the option of other is maybe not a great one, but giving an option of, I'm not sure where this goes, please help. I know for blind submission, this is a selection like we did for mid-camp, it is just a spreadsheet of just the talk titles and the body field. So we're looking at, what is this content in the first place before we're even trying to figure out what track it was supposed to be in. I've had talks that I did not think were design talks, put into design tracks because that's where they best thought it should go. Talks that I thought were business went into project management tracks before. I don't think there's a 100% one right way to do that. it does come down to communication. The more communicative you are, I'm be willing to give this talk in any track, but I think this talk belongs in a community track. And if a community track doesn't exist, maybe a being human track exists. And if those two tracks don't exist, and there's just a general improvement track, maybe that's the right one. It's going to vary greatly, but the biggest thing is don't hesitate to communicate both ways. That letting submitters know that you don't have to pick your own category. We will help you with that. And someone submitting knowing that it might end up in a track you think different than the one you intended, and be okay with that. All right. Hey, we got a question from Chris O'Donnell out there. Do you think that conference organizers prefer talks that you have done previously, and thus they can only see on YouTube, or they can see on YouTube, or do they care if it only exists as an outline at the time of submission? That's a good question. It varies, again, wildly. I know if you submit to DrupalCon, they want it practiced, they want it polished. If you submit to certain WordCamps, they want fresh. They want something that's never appeared anywhere, and this is fresh content you can only get here, and there's a draw to that. But it varies. I think the best time you give a talk is about the third time, third or fourth time. Just from personal experience, because it's still new, you're still working out the rough spots, but you're not so polished that, oh, I've done this talk 10 times before. In fact, after 8, I like to retire them. 8 is like an upper max that I've hit. About after 8 times, I'm starting to get bored with that topic, and I'll morph it, create another talk out of the same basic idea. But once the content is out there, this is true for me. You can go see me giving the same talk multiple times out in the world, and that talk is still being accepted. So it varies greatly. Again, this comes down to communicating. If a camp is very vocal about it wanting to be a new talk, they will put it on their site, on the submission page. Reaching out to the organizers is never a bad idea. They're volunteers, just like you are a volunteer for submitting your talk. So just let that communication happen, and they might say we'd prefer something new, and it's time to polish off or shine up something new. Or they might say we want the best and best of only, and then just know that you're going to give that talk that you've given 5-6 times before.
This is Kevin. Just to piggyback on that question,
sure.
Say this is your first conference and you give a session. Is there a minimum time limit? Because with this being your first, if you're nervous and you kind of run through those slides pretty quickly, but you don't mess up, but you go through them in 30 minutes opposed to 45 minutes, is that frowned upon for the next conference submission?
I can't say for the next conference submission. I just know that it happens to everybody. And it's not as bad a thing as you think. There definitely are maximums. There are maximum times that we have to be out of the room by for the next session to start. But there's no minimum that I've ever heard of. In fact, one of my favorite talks I've ever attended was at WordCamp Los Angeles last year from a blogger and marketing expert out of Las Vegas named Kitty Lusby. And her only slide was a slide that said, "There are no slides," and her contact information. And her entire talk was, "All right, let's get better at this. Time for Q&A." And the whole thing was a giant Q&A, and everybody loved it. And it was one of the better talks I saw at that camp. So the structure of it really depends talk to talk. Some people really want to go all the way to the edge and leave the minimum time for Q&A, and some people are the opposite. I myself like a talk like this. I had 30 minutes of material and 50 minutes of time, from my understanding, 50 minutes to 60 minutes of time. So the rest of that is going to definitely be Q&A. I think Q&A, in fact, one of the talks that I recently started giving is structured so it is less than a half an hour of material, and the rest becomes a group conversation. And I'm specifically structuring it to do that. So there's no real rules on that. It depends on if the content's good or not. And if you are the subject matter expert, and I'm going to pick on SEO again because that's an easy one. If you're the subject matter in SEO and you just want to get up there and say 4 things about SEO, it takes you 5 minutes to say it, and the rest is just Q&A, there's going to be a lot of value from people in that room. And if people walk out of the room and their feedback is that was super valuable, you'll be invited to another talk.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Other questions? Oh, I'm just going to throw this out there. I actually don't have it in the slides. I should put it in the slides. This is a part of the believe in yourself. And I said subject matter expert there. You don't have to be a subject matter expert. I kind of stressed that earlier on. As long as something you're passionate about and something that you know something about. But a friend of mine said at WordCamp Seattle, I believe, Rachel Cherry said from stage, like, we're not up here because we're the subject matter experts. We're up here because we agreed to talk. And that's what it really boils down to. If you are willing to volunteer your time and put yourself out there, that is way more important than being the definitive subject matter expert, because I don't even know what that means, especially in a world where things change as rapidly as they do in our space. Who knows all about Composer, for instance? Maybe a handful of people. But if you know something about Composer, you know more than a lot of people. So put yourself out there. All right. I think we have time for a couple more questions.
All right. Well, last call, folks. Any questions? We'll give everybody one more minute to kind of either post something in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and say it out loud. Otherwise, we'll kind of go into closing. I'll just give you a few more seconds to decide.
So as we're wrapping up here, let me just slide back. Here, excuse me. So the slide back up here. If you could tweet at me, I would love that. I love Twitter mentions out in the world. But feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to, if you're like, I don't want to ask that question in front of everyone and have it be on YouTube forever. Understand that as well. Reach out to me. I'm always willing to talk and make time for you.
All right. Well, thanks, Dwayne, so much for being here with us today and giving this talk. I think we've all, I know I certainly have learned, take a lot away, and now feeling a little bit more motivated to submit some sessions for things I may not have always felt as comfortable doing. So thank you again to our audience. Thank you for participating. And just as a reminder, take this information that you have learned and use it to help write your session submission for upcoming Drupal GovCon being held in August. And not just for us, but as Dwayne mentioned, right, the third best time is often your best your best rendition. So there's tons of other camps and meetup groups and things like that that you can get involved in. So we hope that this session has encouraged everybody to become a little bit more active and submit your sessions. And we hope to see you at any of our local events. Again, as I mentioned, the recording of this will be up on the Drupal for Gov YouTube channel, and we'll include the links to the material that Dwayne mentioned here as well. So at any point in time, reach out to us at GovDrupal on Twitter, and we'll be happy to reach out to you, or drupalforgov@gmail.com. I'll leave the Zoom open for a few more minutes, just if anybody has any last-minute questions for me. But otherwise, you've got 9 more minutes left in your day. And again, thanks, Dwayne, for this great webinar, and thanks to everybody else for attending.